Hi, welcome to High Output, the podcast exploring how today's engineering leaders are building tomorrow's high performing teams. I'm your host, William Cheng, and each episode, we sit down with visionary engineering leaders who are forging new paths in a rapidly evolving field. Join us as we gain a window into tomorrow's software organizations and discover what's next for both our profession and the entire software industry. This episode is brought to you by Maestro AI. Engineering leaders, let's be real. Building high-performing software teams has never been more challenging. You're juggling delivery timelines, team health, and the constant pressure to communicate value upward. That's where Maestro comes in. Maestro enables you to improve velocity, spot blockers, and make better decisions faster by seamlessly integrating with your existing tools like Jira, GitHub, and Slack. Maestro cuts through the noise, revealing exactly where your team is spending time and energy. Visit getmaestro.ai for more info, because you don't know everything, but Maestro does. All right. I'm super excited today to welcome our guest. And our guest today is Ashwin Baskaran. He's the VP of Engineering at Mercury, the fintech more than 200,000 ambitious companies and entrepreneurs trust with their finances. He joined the company a year and a half ago after leading engineering at 0x, a leader and early innovator in decentralized finance. He started his career as an engineer on satellite and telecommunication systems, and later moved into enterprise security and networking. He's worked at startups like KMS Systems and at scale with companies like VMware. Ashwin moved into engineering management more than 20 years ago and is driven by building cohesive teams, fostering professional growth, and of course, shipping great products. Outside of work, he's often reading a book about, well, could be anything. Welcome to the show, Ashwin.
Thank you, William. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, super excited to get into it. Please tell us how you got into engineering.
It's got to be one of the more boring stories because it's basically the only thing I ever did.
That's
Um,
cool.
yeah, I got some exposure early on, early days in the 80s. Just kind of fooling around with like, BBC Spectrums and things like that. Nothing fancy. I didn't really have access to these systems too much. And just as I was getting into high school, the high school offered a computer science as a subject for the first time the year that I joined, that I got in.
Nice.
So I took that. I joke that I grew up. I was going to school in a place called Trichy in the southern part of India, very hot place. The only air conditioner in the school was for the two PCs that we had. So it was a chance to spend some time in an air conditioned room. But yeah, jokes aside. I just kind of did that ever since. I went to college, studied CS in college, got a master's, got into software engineering. So yeah, a very kind of straight and narrow path.
I mean, that's it, it's still incredibly cool though. The first year they offered the program and you jump right on it.
Yeah, yeah. It was definitely, new and novel and interesting at the time. There was, not too many people to talk to ask like, hey, what is this thing about? So yeah, it was just fun.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, we don't think about computers nowadays as being a new thing. Um, but in the grand scheme of things, they really are, right? We've had so many transformations over the past 20, 30 years. We have, computers getting big, then the internet, then phones, now AI and all that stuff. It feels like there's been a lot. You must have seen a lot of change.
That's for sure. But yeah, I feel like we can wind that back a bit. And there's been like several significant things that, we kind of have gotten, kind of accustomed to, right? So yeah, on the one hand, yes, lots of things changing. And it does feel like the pace of change may be accelerating as well. I'm not a deep theorist, so I don't have any any ideas like whether that might be happening or why, but it does feel like it. Being in the sort of the tech space in general, it does feel like not only are changes happening, they seem to be happening faster, and some of them are also bigger.
Yeah, yeah. Well, how did you get into engineering leadership? From the intro, you said it's been a while. Was it a conscious switch, or did you did it just happen?
Very much just happened. I was at a startup. I was at a company called KMS Systems, as you mentioned in the bio. And I was the sole engineer working on this particular part of the product.
Wow.
And we had this idea of adding one or two people to that and making a team out of it. And our VP of engineering just asked me like, "Hey, do you want to like maybe run the hiring process and like take a stab at managing?" I was like, I guess okay, why not? And I liked the nature of that problem. I think it was also like a bit of a soft intro, right? Because you're still basically coding most of the time anyway. It's one person, maybe two people. You know the product, you know the code. I was a fairly early employee as well, so I had all the context. So it was pretty easy as a sort of a first step. It was a very gentle ramp. The bigger shift, I think, that convinced me that this was good, like a good choice for me at least, is Camus was acquired by Citrix, and when we went over, I consciously asked for a chance to do something different, and I got into managing a team that was doing like Linux kernel networking stuff and like protocol optimizations and stuff like that, completely outside my zone of knowledge at the time. But that's when I felt like, okay, now I'm really exercising my management muscle because I don't really know the space. I don't know the code. I don't know the domain. I mean, I learned a little bit of it over the years, but that's when I was convinced that this is actually a good choice.
That's interesting. I mean, how did that transition go? Cayman Systems was definitely not as big as Citrix, right? Like,
For
how did
sure.
that? What did that feel like?
Yeah, it definitely felt different. I think there were a lot of like coordination between groups and certainly more top-down planning processes and kind of things like that that I had to get used to. But I think the thing that also helped a little bit is the fact that I joined a group that had also just been acquired or fairly
Hmm.
recently been acquired, like maybe in the last
Okay.
year, and was still operating somewhat independently. So it kind of made it feel like, yes, bigger company, substantially larger company, but also like, yeah, some level of, yeah, you don't suddenly have to coordinate with 100 other people. It's still, okay, maybe four people instead of one, but it was still, relatively small and relatively isolated. So that helped kind of get me used to it.
Yeah. What were some of the early challenges you had? Like, what was, was there anything that did it all come naturally, or was there some bits that you slipped up on?
No doubt slipped up several times, but maybe like a couple of specific things to point out would be things like managing very senior engineers.
Mm,
So that, I had three principal engineers on my team within like a year of joining Citrix.
wow.
And these were like deep experts
Mm-hmm.
in networking. They knew the protocols, they knew how the protocol was evolving. They were Linux kernel networking experts and all of that, deduplication technologies, like all of those kinds of things. And there was definitely a little bit of, first of all, imposter syndrome, walking into
Mm-hmm.
it and like, I actually don't understand what this guy's trying to tell me. And then like just finding ways to work with them, show that, hey, you can complement their skill set by making it easier for them to get stuff done, by finding and like solving organizational problems before they actually have to, face them. And then you kind of build that kind of, okay, I see the value that you're bringing to this team. Now I'm more inclined to kind of spend time with you if I have to explain a technical
Mm.
problem or something like that. Drawing them into like architectural discussions, and making sure that I have sort of guidance on the technical front from a person that actually knows this, and not putting myself in a position where I have to somehow make a technical decision without the knowledge, right? So I think that was sort of the first, like, trial by fire kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but the second one that definitely comes to mind, this was a couple of years later. The team had already gone through some changes, and I was moving into sort of you know, overseeing a group overall, as opposed to sort of one team on the product. And I took on that role at the exact same time that we decided to refresh our complete appliance lineup.
Ah.
And so all of a sudden, I had to run projects that were about like, you can loosely think about it like designing new Intel servers,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is not something I'd ever had to think about before. Like, oh, what kind of NIC should we use? What kind of storage device should we use? You know, um, And I remember having a conversation with my VP of engineering at the time, saying like, "Hey, I really don't know anything in this space, and you're like, we have all these ambitious things. Like in the next 8 weeks, we're gonna try to like ship some of these new appliances." And the thing that clicked in my mind was I still remember like how calm he was, first of all, and just like how calmly he went through the conversation. It was very short, and it was like a minute or 2 minutes where the basic thrust of it was, I think you can figure this out. And it was like
That must have
we have
felt
people
good
here.
though, right? That must have felt good. He really believed in you.
Yeah, honestly, it didn't feel that way at the time.
Really?
I was like, does he believe in me or is he just like setting me up for failure? It's
Like
like he
brushing
was
you
a
off?
very nice person, very, very well intentioned. So, he definitely wasn't doing that. But in the moment, it definitely, felt like, hey, is he just like he just has other priorities, and this product is maybe not the number one on his list. I was going through certainly all of those negative possibilities, but certainly in retrospect, yeah, he was just kind of saying, yeah, you have some space, you have resources, you have other people you can talk to, you're not alone. So, just like get started working on this, and we'll get to the other side together, kind of thing. So, yeah, I think a couple of those things really gave me the confidence that management is really its own thing, and then it works together. And this whole idea of like socio-technical systems and things like that, like really gel when you go through these experiences where you figure out like, yeah, it's just this doesn't work, just that doesn't work, but you put them together and good things can happen.
That's super interesting. I mean, okay, so then just doubling down on that, right? Do you think as an engineering leader, do you need domain expertise? Or is it more of a generalized, like, is it its own thing? Or yeah, I've heard people say like, hey, you can't be a good engineering leader unless you really deeply understand the technical stack, right? And other people say, no, 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 like it's mostly a people thing, right? And so it's a different skill set. What do you think?
I think it's very situation dependent.
Hmm.
It depends on, for example, the stage that the company's at, right? If you're early stage, you're still, exploring product market fit or something like that, or you're on the frontiers of like, where the technology is at the time. Yeah, then 100% it makes sense that your effectiveness is going to be substantially higher if you're deeply technical. Um, on the other hand, you can just to draw a contrast. Obviously, it's not like there are only two things. There's basically an infinite number of combinations.
Hmm.
But you might be an organization that's going through severe growth pains, right? You're growing
Hmm.
really fast, but it's not just about the technology at that point. Like, one of the blog posts that's gone, I would say, viral recently is the post from the person who left OpenAI and wrote up some
Yeah.
reflections on it, right, in the last couple of days. And yeah, he talks about how the organization grew from 1,000 to 3,000 in the year that he was there.
Hmm.
um, yeah, I don't think technical solutions alone are going to get you where you need to be, right? So, yeah, in a nutshell, yeah, I think it is very situation dependent. And as you get larger, it's also like you want a mix of players on the team. Like, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the best thing for your org if everybody is super technical and nobody cares about the other parts of it. So you kind of need to, as you build out a team, you kind of have to think about, all of the different things, problems that you're going to face and have to solve, and who cares about these problems, who actually like is passionate about them. And yeah, it's helpful. It's to some extent, I would say it's relatively speaking easier to find somebody who's really passionate about the technology
Hmm.
and a little bit harder to find people who are actually motivated by solving like debugging a people problem or like figuring out some kind of organizational bottleneck at a deep level. So yeah, context dependent. And yeah, you got to think about it as the set of things that the company needs as opposed to like the ideal archetype, which in my opinion doesn't exist.
Yeah, yeah, and it goes back to your first, being thrown into hiring your first team right off the bat, right? It's like, right now through your experience, what I'm hearing is you've gotten to a point where it's like you're not just hiring. It's not like you're just hiring like people, really. You are hiring people, but you're also hiring to fill a gap in the overall team structure, and like
Exactly.
it may not be. might not always be that you want the best technical person. Like maybe the gap
Correct.
is somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it becomes a little bit trickier, I think, when you think about technical leadership roles. And you have to, you have to leave some white space for the existing folks on your team to grow into, and you can't always leave white space in all areas. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
some areas where you have that luxury, some areas where you don't. Um, and you want to, you expect that at least you want to think that you have a high hiring bar, you're bringing good people in, they're going to want to grow. Many of them are going to want to grow, and so you don't want to just kind of fill out your entire technical leadership team and then just have the very promising, very strong folks who are one stage behind that in their career just leave because they just don't see the white space
Yeah.
for them to grow into. So yeah, with technical roles I feel like it's a little bit more tricky in some ways.
Yeah. Has hiring changed over the years? Like what you're looking for as a skill set or anything. Well, let's take a technical role just to keep it simple first. Um, what are you looking for now versus, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago? Has it changed?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the core of it, I would say, is there is over the last even like 20 years, I would say there's been more and more recognition that you need, some level of roundedness.
Mm,
I would say interviews in the first, early part of when I became a manager and so on, tended to be, for engineers at least, tended to be very technically oriented. There would be multiple coding rounds, things like
mm-hmm,
that.
mm-hmm,
And I think the level of sort of understanding that, hey, simply doing more technical interviews doesn't necessarily give you more signal.
mm-hmm.
Often, like a well-designed single coding interview can give you more signal than four or five like ad hoc, like, hey, engineer X goes in there and throws their favorite like, brain twister,
Mm-hmm.
or like, something that has a flavor of a puzzle, and somebody has to implement something on the spot on a whiteboard. Like all of those things have gone away, I would say, or at least in all the places that I'm aware of,
Mm,
and they've been replaced with like, hey, something that's a bit more concrete. It's more tied to the work that you might be doing. And something that's, there's a lot of focus on like calibration and making sure every interviewer is looking for similar things. I think, Mercury has done a great job, and they've made some tweaks, but I think the same process has been used for at least more than a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years.
nice.
So well before I got here. And of course, now, we're starting to think about coding assistants and things like that and how that comes in. But I feel like that level of rigor in understanding what signal we're actually getting from this time, yeah, I think industry has definitely evolved in that respect. And yeah, just things like a little more focus on product sense
Mm,
and thinking about quality and those kinds of things. Somewhat context dependent, but I think the sort of the typical product company, I think, has more of an expectation, which I think is justified now, that engineers will also have ideas on the product and have product sense and have an idea like what makes a product good and so on, so they can incorporate that into their decision making and not like outsource their thinking.
yeah. Well, concretely, how do you check for that? And how do you, like it's is it you have them do like product related things, or you ask them questions, or is it just a gut feel on how they even solve a technical problem? Like, what's your approach?
Yeah, a few different things, and it very much depends on the role and the level and so on. We do have a what we call a product interview, which isn't always run by product managers.
Hmm.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Yeah, some complications around the roles and whatnot. Um, and we have a fairly well calibrated rubric on how we assess candidates based on what they say. Um, it is, to some extent, like, yeah, the question itself might be getting a little bit long in the tooth at this point, but like I said, most of the process has been fairly stable for a while.
Hmm.
And so there's some discussion around like, yeah, we probably need to update it and improve it and so on. But yes, the short answer is yes, we do explicitly
Hmm.
try to screen for that. I'll give you one more concrete example. I tend to interview most. We're slowly ramping that down just because we've gotten quite large. But I tend
Hmm.
to interview most like um, senior software engineer and above kind of candidates.
Hmm.
And one of the things I literally ask candidates sometimes to just, okay, explain the product, like define the product.
Mm.
And I leave it fairly vague. And whether it's like, hey, I built this infrastructure for this databases to do X or whatever it is, or like more easily like, oh, we built a product that helps general contractors do X. It's like I'm looking for people who have the sense like, yeah, there's a boundary, and this boundary is being experienced by somebody,
Hmm.
and I have the sense of how they're experiencing it, and I know where the lines are, and I have some follow-up questions that kind of tease that out, but it's like, hey, what kind of changes did you make to the system you were building based on something somebody else told you about it, like
Hmm.
some user told you about it? And those kinds of things like bring out the sense of, hey, I'm not, quote unquote, just like a coder, right? I'm actually thinking about what I'm building and how it fits into the larger context and what bigger business problem it's solving.
Hmm.
Um, and it doesn't apply to every single role, but for many of our roles or most of our roles, and I would say like the average software engineering role, I feel like that's a useful thing to know, even if you're not building like an obvious consumer product or enterprise product or something. If it's an infrastructure product, it's a library, it's anything like that. Like you should still have that sense of, yeah, this is the thing that I'm building, this is the problem that it solves for somebody else. And, having that sense of where's the boundary and the business context, I feel is quite important.
Yeah. No, that's a great insight where that more well-rounded context can help in many different ways. I mean, even if it's internal, right? Like just interfacing with other teams, like they are essentially the other team could be your customer, right? And so
Right,
understanding
exactly.
that can make the whole company work better.
Do you, question for you, I guess, do you think about it similarly or do you have a different view on this?
Yeah, so we're an early stage startup, and so by necessity, we don't have that many people.
Yeah,
And we absolutely have to do it that way because
yeah,
if people aren't coming with product ideas or noticing by themselves how some user might run into hiccups, we're just building too fast, right? You can't we don't have the resources to have someone like strictly focused on only the technical things all the time. So
right.
yeah, absolutely. And I really like working with people that are extremely technically strong, but I found that the team needs to be a lot larger if they just solely want to be, there has to be this role, which is like, hey, look, you're solving this long-term hard technical problem, and only in those types of roles would I look for the type of like, okay, this is, maybe like less product sense and everything, but still like just a completely stellar technical side of things. Like I think there's a fit for that, but right now at our stage, that's not what we were looking for.
Yeah, that definitely resonates.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to dig into one thing that you mentioned earlier, which is now with AI coding assistants and that sort of thing, that you might be changing your selection process or thinking about things a little bit differently. Um, how are the recent AI changes affecting you guys?
I guess broad question. So yeah, let me just
Everything, right?
yeah, exactly. That's definitely the succinct answer. Um, so let me focus maybe just on the coding assistance part of it first, and then we can broaden it from there. Um, so our general kind of hypothesis is that it's going to be a net positive. Obviously there's a lot of uncertainty around like the range of benefits we might get out of it and so on. Um, the hypothesis is also that it is going to be a bit of a journey. It's not something, in 30 days we're just like 25% more productive, and then in a year we're like 50, whatever. Like
That'd be cool.
I yeah, that'd be cool. And I think the level of sophistication in sort of the industry level understanding of this is obviously like, I'm sure there's some experts who are like really, close enough to the to the details to be able to see the future. But I think on average, I think we're trying to figure out things like, hey, how much should we potentially how much might we potentially gain, and how much should we potentially change the rest of our process and behavior and architectures to actually make this practical? Like, do we get a 2x speed up if we not just adopt coding assistance, but also make this change in architecture?
Mm.
Um, so, as a sort of a simple example of that, lots of people have written about how greenfield applications, you know, like it's very quick to
Mm-hmm.
build, vibe coding and all the rest.
Like a
Well,
prototype or something.
certainly prototypes, but even just like greenfield application, like
Mm.
it's
Okay.
it's V1. You're
Brand
building
new.
V1.
Yep.
Um, but then what happens when you get adoption and you scale and whatnot? Like, does it look like the typical journey, or does it look like very different? Like, okay, you grew by 4x. Congratulations, now you need to rebuild it from scratch. Versus like, okay, now you can do the normal thing, like you can evolve it and you can adjust the architecture and like the approaches that we've been used to. Um, it's impacting, like it's creating discussions around like your tech stack. Hey, which kind of tech stack is more or less friendly? And there's some hypotheses of like, oh yeah, if you use Python or TypeScript, you're likely to get like better results. We've certainly heard the anecdotal evidence, but is that really true? Like, does that mean
Mm-hmm.
we should go adopt those stacks? So I think there's that whole range of uncertainty and so on. But internally, like most other teams of reasonable size, we have I think over 250 engineers now. There's some early adopters, trying to figure out what it does in, front end and back end
Mm-hmm.
scenarios. We have folks on our infrastructure team using coding assistance for like, various things, like generating Terraform and kind of things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then there's people kind of testing out like the agentic stuff. Can we just kind of say, "Hey, cursor, can you do this thing for us?" And some experiments there. One of our engineers kind of had a nice breakdown just a couple of days ago on Slack, where it was like, "Hey, there's the straightforward, like I want to implement a feature. What's the best way?" And yeah, that has
Mm-hmm.
certain kinds of like there's a certain profile to like a certain shape of the problem, which is kind of more friendly to this versus not, versus like using it for the one-off things. Like, hey, I need to solve this problem, but this is not a problem I have to solve 1,000 times in my career. It's like I'll do it twice. So I just give that to the AI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like remembering magic incantations for some tool. um, you know, uh, like those are kind of the productivity boosts in the grand scheme of things, but if it won't show up in a how much code did you produce with AI, or like, what
Mm-hmm.
was the time saved when you implemented this feature using Cursor or whatever versus not. So I think it is complicating the picture of how we think about productivity and how we think about like architecture, and how that feeds into productivity. My instinct, which I'm biased to, full disclosure, is that, good modular architectures, low coupling, high cohesion, good boundaries between
Mm-hmm.
systems, and so on, probably helps, not
Mm-hmm.
hurts. Again, I'm not an expert, but things like, hey, the less context you need to incorporate into whatever you're doing, yeah, the better outcomes you can expect, and so on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then this last thing to mention on that is on the how we think about candidates, and what kinds of things should we be screening for. Um, Unfortunately, I'm blanking on the name of the tool right now, but there is a relatively new startup out there that
Hmm.
is essentially producing like you can think of it like a screen share of how somebody's using coding assistants to produce whatever outcome, and they can
Interesting.
use different, like anything that works with VS Code, and it kind of hooks into it and kind of gives you a full sense of how they use it. So we can even lean into things like, hey, maybe we want to bring on a few more people who are actually like more familiar with this tool. Can we
Mm-hmm.
create a different interview path for them, where we're not trying to say like, well, what can we ask them to make sure they understand the code, versus like, let's give them a more complicated than typical problem. And if they're actually proficient at using these assistants, they can still finish it. And you can watch them, go through the process of using the tools, and like, okay, how are they
Yeah.
using the tool? Are they just relying on like prompting, or do they have like more sophisticated mechanisms and things like that? So yeah, I only touched on AI coding assistants, but obviously a lot to unpack even just there. And of course, we haven't even talked about like incorporating it into the product and,
Of
all of
course.
those kinds of things.
Man, that's crazy. And what I like about what you said is this is very complex, and I think there are a lot of experiments to be run. I mean, even
Yeah.
the hiring thing, it doesn't sound like you're like, okay, we're only going to hire for people who are good at AI or something, or like you're only going to, it's more like, hey, look, we need to measure and test it, and we have a hypothesis. Maybe it'd be better if we had some of these people come in that have more AI experience.
Yeah.
Let's try a different hiring track and see how that goes. And I feel like that is what we've heard a lot of successful companies are doing. It's not like, okay, there's the hype train, we're going all in,
Yeah.
100% on everything on day one. It's more it's more of a measured and thoughtful approach where you think about the actual scenarios that you can maybe get the most benefits and then try to test that out.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's some risk with that, right? Because maybe the technology is just it's primarily a technical problem and it just like solves the rest of it.
Hmm.
And then you
Hmm.
might be stuck behind. Like somebody has moved forward, somebody is just much more expert in using this technology and so on. So there's definitely some risk to that. And I think also like finding a way to design an experiment in this area is not easy.
Hmm. Hmm.
There was this METR paper that went out that got, a bunch of attention,
Hmm.
both positive
Hmm.
and negative, um, in the last couple of days. But yeah, I don't think like measuring these things is trivial either. And it's easy to just go rely exclusively on vibes, you know? So yeah, I think we're still thinking through it. I don't think we have a good answer, and certainly not anything that we feel like, oh yeah, we can share our experience with you. Like, here's how we were successful at it. Because I think we're still figuring it out. Like, how do we actually measure this thing? And at the same time, like, I don't think the idea of just running a lot of ad hoc experiments is necessarily the best either. Like,
Right.
hey, let a thousand flowers bloom. I don't think that's the best for the scenario either. So,
Right.
still working on trying to figure out what a good path is in this area.
Yeah. Well, one thing I think we already do have, just like for people who use these systems, myself included, that consensus is building a bit is your modular statement, right?
Yeah.
Models are still just not that good at huge context. Even if you can accept a million tokens, should you actually use a million tokens? Probably not. It doesn't behave as well, right? And so that there's something left to be solved there. And to your point, it could be a technical thing, like maybe OpenAI or Anthropic or one of these guys will just solve it. But it also feels a little bit like you can hedge a little bit, right? If your system is designed in a more modular way, you can build for the world where maybe they don't miraculously solve everything day one,
Right.
and still have a system that you can run with.
Yeah. This reminds me of this nice analysis of Claude's system prompts that I read somewhere. I've forgotten the source now. But I think one of the more recent prompts actually has some guidance on using short variable names. Um,
Ah.
and it's explicitly in the prompt, it actually says like to maximize the value of the context, like use, variables like L for element and like, something like that. So it's
Yeah.
clearly still a problem, and acknowledged by Anthropic in that case. Um, so yeah, clearly a lot to be learned, new technology. So I'm sure we'll learn more in the coming months and years.
Yeah. Well, okay. Now, what if you project it forward based on what you know today? And maybe it's like, hey, I don't know, but let's look forward 3 to 5 years. Like, what's next? And you can take that very broadly or narrowly in however way you want to take that.
Yeah.
What's
The
the future look like?
Yeah, the completely intellectual honest answer would definitely be I don't know. But since we're speculating here,
Hmm.
um, I like this sort of concept that this will actually drive extreme modularity.
Mm.
Like, sometimes when people talk about like oh, let's not create too many services
Yeah.
because yeah, there's a lot of interaction now to be solved, a lot of boilerplate around those things. You know, you got to have a schema, and then you got to write all the, you know, the whatever your protobuf code or your gRPC code or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And all of those things that are toil associated with building something that way kind of could vanish. In fact,
Mm.
like those could be some of the early things that vanish. And so, yeah, I kind of, again, it feels right to me. Like I said, like it's not based on, oh, I have deep LLM knowledge at all. But it feels right that, you know, you could really solve like very small problems. You could solve problems for the customer of, you know, the one
Mm-hmm.
customer
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, while still keeping your code overall like fairly isolated. And so but you could go to this extreme modularity world. The second thing that I saw somewhere else, this is not my own idea by any means, but is around this idea that your prompts or some variation of the prompt, you know, plus other contextual information could actually be the new code.
Mm.
And that your code itself is kind
Mm-hmm.
of like, you know, assembly code or machine code is today,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the thing that you produce whenever you need it. It's not the thing that you actually version control.
Yeah.
And I do like
Yeah.
that idea because it means that you could be working at a very high level of abstraction in that world.
Yeah. The LLM becomes the compiler, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like another level of a compiler.
yeah. So yeah, I kind of like that. I think I would like that world. I don't know. It's a dangerous thing to say, I guess, but I think it'd be an interesting world.
Nice, nice. And do you think people will still have engineers will still have jobs in that world?
Yeah, I certainly feel that that's what's going to happen. But I do have sort of some feeling that it's going to be a very unequal
Mm,
thing.
mm,
There's going to be like I think experts will be needed, and there's definitely some valid concerns around like how will new experts be made.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and I think you know there's a democratized kind of aspect of it where a lot of people can produce code now who could not have produced code before. But it yeah, there's that kind of fuzzy, messy middle, and it's unclear, you know, where's the yeah, how do those folks add value?
Yeah,
You know, it is unclear to me, and I think it just kind of, I guess, maybe reinforces this notion that, yeah, it's worthwhile, even for as you think about the evolution of the industry, to develop a strong product sense, to understand like the rest of it, you know, beyond the code, because for people to achieve your level of proficiency in the code is imminent.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a good takeaway, right? I think we'll still be dealing with humans as time goes on.
Yeah,
So understanding
certainly.
human needs is not going to go away.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Man, well, fantastic, Ashwin. Thank you for taking the time to chat. From both, looking at your history and how you got into things, all the way to some great hiring insights, all the way to talking about the future. Thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. It was a good conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of High Output. If today's conversation was useful, please take a moment to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Engineering leadership is evolving rapidly, and we're committed to bringing you insights from the front lines every week. Visit getmaestro.ai/high-output for show notes, transcripts, and past episodes. Until next time, I'm William Chang, and this has been High Output, where we explore how today's engineering leaders are building tomorrow's high-performing teams.